3, 2, 1, action.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2023 business meeting of the Groton Arm Board of Education. I'm Neil Haber, Vice President. Unfortunately, Secretary, our President, is under the weather today and will not be with us physically, although I know she's here in spirit. And we will commence the meeting by the Pledge of Allegiance. I understand we do not have a class joining us, so we will just do it ourselves. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Born unborn.
Okay. Item 1.3, approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carried. Okay, item 2.1 is the president's report. Since the president is not here and just informed us this afternoon that she would not be here, rather than trying to put something together at the last minute, we will dispense with that report and pick it up next month. So we now move to item 2.2, hearing of the public. If you are anyone in the audience desires to speak, please indicate your name. You can fill out the form indicating whether you're a district resident. Comments are limited to 3 minutes.
So it's coming pretty fast on the agenda. As usual practice. Ed Riley from Trudeau Drive. I was startled to see, but it's expected based upon the comments of one of the members of the board last week. That is a policy change to cut the word boys and girls sport in the policy change. And I was in that meeting, because that meeting, there were actually a couple of meetings on allowing kids to play out, and that never came up, never heard it once in the meeting. So hopefully you're not like the village board, where you talk about stuff off camera and out of earshot of the public. But I'm worried about that, and I'm wondering what to expect, especially in this transgender craze. It's not really a craze, it's sort of like a plague. So if that's the start, I can see trouble ahead in this district. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact, which I'll give you the copies of, that Loudoun County, which is the wealthiest county in the United States, that's where it is. One of your board members knows exactly where it is. I know a lot about that county and the counties next to it. They had a big student walkout because the school district, the countywide school district in Virginia, decided to allow transgenders into the girls' bathrooms. Interesting, because there were 2 assaults in the girls' bathroom by a transgender boy against girls. And still, this school district, this insane school district, persisted in this policy, which they call policy 8040. If you're headed in that direction, there's big trouble ahead. Item 2. In the past, this school district has used the Southern Poverty Law Conference as you've referenced it, you put it in your paperwork, you put it in your DEI stuff. This is a shakedown operation, which 50 years ago had a decent purpose, but in the last few years has become guilty of racial discrimination against its own employees, sexual harassment, offshore bank accounts, inflated accounts of bias and hate, where you pay them to call your enemy a hater and put them on the list. It's a terrible organization with a terrible record, and it joins the 4 other groups that you have used as authoritative in the past, including BLM Corporation, Black Lives Matter Corporation, the professor from Florida State, and other organizations. and you should never reference them again as a source of any authority. We're about out of time here. I'd like to draw your attention that there's bad times at hand. The President of the United States forced the automobile unions to settle for a 24% raise increase over 3 years. And the state of Pennsylvania, because the governor's up for re-election, just forced through a 25% raise for state employees. If I was in the union, which I was, I'd be asking for a lot more coming up. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Seeing no one else who wishes to speak, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Neil. Good evening, everybody. Thanks to the Tigers who are doing it in person and those watching from home. I'll be relatively brief tonight, but always a wonderful opportunity to get a chance to talk about some of the special things happening in our schools. And for tonight, I wanted to begin by thanking all of our fall student athletes, coaches, families, athletic director Bill Tom, wonderful support from Carla, from the Booster Club. Really was a wonderful ride this fall season. It was it was a great joy to get a chance to watch our student athletes be part of wonderful moments in their lives, make memories that they will take with them long into adulthood, and to feel a great sense of Tiger pride around the district in a way that I think I haven't experienced in the time that I've been here. And it was a special series of weeks culminating these past 2 days with some great sectional competition from several of our teams. And actually the swim team is at it right now, I believe, competing in sectionals as well. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who was involved in our athletics program over these past few weeks. And there's been some discussion about calls and games and how the season ended for some of our student athletes. And I think while those are important conversations, the most important thing is that these are life lessons and experiences that will help to mold them and shape them as people for the rest of their lives. And I think that's one of the most special things to say that we get a chance to be a part of. So again, thank you to everyone who was involved, and we look forward to the winter season. Also, of course, didn't want to miss the opportunity to show some pictures from Halloween. And this is another one of those days. It was just, I think I can speak on behalf of the entire administrative team. We didn't need to be paid for that day. It's just one of those joyful days. And I would just say on behalf of the team, what was most special for me was to get a chance to be a part of something with the entire district office team and the entire central administrative team and the directors, and laughing together and sharing those moments together, getting a chance to visit classrooms throughout the district and disrupt classes for a while and be embarrassed and watch a lot of eye rolling from PBC and high school kids at us, and to get a chance to see how many other Tigers, both students and staff, enjoyed the day. It was one of those really joyful and happy days in our system. So I hope everyone had a very happy and safe Halloween. And of course, also wanted to spend a couple minutes through our Tiger Welcome program, introducing 2 new members of the faculty. The first is Carissa Locatelli, who's joining the Social Studies Department as a lead replacement at the high school. Carissa is teaching Global 1, Global 2, and AP Comparative Government and Politics. She joins us we stole her from Hen Hut, and has brought such terrific energy to her classes, has a really special way of relating to and connecting with our kids. It's one of the first things she talks about is the joy that she gets from spending time getting to know them more. Also, as a Taylor Swift fan, not surprisingly, I'm very like her in the beginning. And to share one fun fact about Carissa, she loves to cook and bake, and her current specialty is pumpkin snickerdoodle cookies. With Dr. B, the gauntlet has been thrown down. All right. So welcome, Carissa. So happy to have you as part of the faculty at CHHS. Also want to introduce Rebecca Stokes, who is a parent of Tiger students and was certainly prior to this year, but now has joined the faculty as well as a reading teacher at CET. Prior to that was a reading teacher at the public schools in Stamford, Connecticut. Works with students in all grades K through 4, providing literacy intervention, has wonderful training, really high quality techniques in terms of how to help supporting developing readers. And herself, one of the things she shared was that not surprisingly, she also loves to read and has a lot of family in Rhode Island. And so one of her favorite things is to get a chance to go back there and to spend time with them. So Rebecca, welcome in this new role to the Tigers. We're thrilled to have you in the reading intervention area at CET. Also wanted to mention briefly that Jared and I had the privilege of getting a chance to join Neil and Sarah last week at the annual convention and expo NISBA up in Buffalo. Really great opportunities to connect with folks from across the state who are who similarly recognize what an important moment this is for public education and the opportunities we have to change the trajectory of the lives of kids. And in addition, of course, because it's Buffalo, you have to make sure you spend a little time eating some good wings. So we did that. Got a chance to bond with each other, which is always important and great, and with other folks and make connections from across the state, in addition to some really valuable and important learning sessions. So thank you to everyone for your support of us, and thanks to the administrative team for continuing to move the ship forward in our absence for those couple of days.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Almost. I mean, when you stop, done.
To close in the way that we normally close, and it's a lot of anticipation around
Maybe I was
some jokes.
trying to wait.
Yeah, come on, you're not gonna skip over those. I did also want to mention that I had a chance yesterday at the end of the day to spend some time with members of the faculty at the high school who are engaging now in the development of interdisciplinary core courses. We know that in direct alignment with the vision map. And this was a conversation led by Ashley Valentine and Isabella Zappa, two outstanding leaders on the faculty who are also the instructional coaches. And it's one of those moments where you just kind of get a chance to be present for a really special conversation about what school can be. And so I wanted to take a moment just to thank everybody who's involved in that. Of course, Laura Duback providing great leadership to that initiative, and we look forward to her return and continuing to move that work forward. But we continue to anticipate there will be 4 interdisciplinary core courses available for students to take here at the high school next year: bioethics, humanities, history through literature, and STEM. So we look forward to that really tremendous step forward. And one of the fun things to see was that Ashley and Isabella spent a good amount of time this fall trying to find other schools that we could connect with who are doing this work. And while they did get a chance to visit a couple, no one is doing it to the extent that we're thinking about doing it. And so it's a reminder of kind of the vision that's associated with what the faculty and students are doing here right now. So it's a special time to be a Tiger. And speaking of special things, I have 2 what I think are outstanding superintendent jokes for your consideration this evening. Let's start with this one. It's a little warm up. Dr. B, let's see how this goes. All right. I decided to spend my life savings buying pasta. That decision was worth every penny. All right. I mean, come on, all right. Okay, second one. In Jamaica, a pie costs $3. In Barbados, a pie costs $2.50. And that is my summary of the Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh, God. I'm turning in my microphone.
I like it. Keep them coming.
All right.
They just get worse and worse.
The last one was good. I thought the last one was good.
That was pretty good.
I like the last one.
That is my report, sir.
That is our report, and I just want to say that during polling, I think, at least I, and perhaps, superintendent may just give a little more detail to the public and to the board about some of the things, some of the sessions we attended and some of the things that we learned. So, I will do that later. But right now, we will hear from Amelia at the student ex officio trustee report.
So I first just want to start off with that, the SFC members are now going to begin attending board meetings, so keep a lookout for them. We really, a big thing that we've been talking about in the meetings is having more school events and extracurricular activities to get more students more comfortable and involved with school and students in other grades. such as hosting another club mixer, which was very successful last year. A lot of talk about maybe a winter formal, and also having a spirit week and pep rally for the winter and spring homecomings to keep that school spirit up. We are looking to change the suggestion box for Student Faculty Congress to a Google form to encourage more students to get involved with the change that they want, as many don't use our physical suggestion box. The first quarter at the high school will be ending on Monday, and parent-teacher conferences will be held after. And we also just wanted to give a huge shout out to our teams that have been ranked top in the state, I believe girls soccer and I think there's another sport, boys volleyball have been ranked in the top 20.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yes, an addition.
Yes,
Superintendent.
and well, Amelia did mention that I did want to share. You want to share your good news, or do you want me to do it?
You can.
All right. So Amelia shared that earlier today, she officially committed, she's going to attend the University of Louisville. So. Lucky to have you. You'll be a Cardinal, but always a Tiger. Congratulations.
Great. Okay, so we move on to new business. Item 3.1, policies for first reading. There are 7 policies, 2 of them new, 5 revision. They are for first reading. If anyone has any comments now, feel free to provide them, and if not, the policy committee will actually, and this will be saying later, but policy committee will be meeting on November 15th. So if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns about any of these policies, please try to get those questions to us by the 15th so we can address them. At the moment, or at this point, are there any questions or comments that anyone on the board has with respect to any of these policies? Yeah.
Can you just briefly address the revisions and the motivation for them?
You mean in each of them?
Yeah.
Okay, the revisions that are incorporated are by and large recommendations from NISBA based on changes in the regulations that govern special education. That's the 4000 series, and items that Rachel DePaul, our Director of Personnel Services, identified that we should incorporate. I mean, I can go through each one of them, or a particular one that you may be.
No, that's what I wanted.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other thing, though, I will add is that the new policies, policy 4327, which regards homebound instruction, is something that we have been doing, but we do not have a formal policy, and it was felt that we should have such a policy. And policy, the other new one, sorry, oh, I was wrong, there's one new policy and 6 revisions. So that's the reason for the new policy. The other thing to note is that policy 4321.12 and 4321.12 are talking about timeout and restraints based on a recent change in the commissioner's regulations on that subject. The prohibitions or restrictions on the use of timeouts and other restraints apply to all students, not just the students who have an IEP. And so that policy has been revised to meet that change in the regulations. Are there any other questions, either now or before the 15th? Please let us know what you got. You okay? We're good? Okay, great. Okay. Item 3.2, facilities use fee waiver for the Catholic Youth Organization, CYO. Resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the 2023-2024 building use fee waiver, not building use waiver fee, for the Catholic Youth Organization.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
On the question, let me just add that we're talking only here about the waiver of the fee, not the application for the use of the facility, which has already been approved through the processes that are set forth in policy 1500 and 1500R. But the board, under that policy, has the authority and responsibility for approving waivers of the fee.
I'm sorry, what? You're saying that it's already approved by the administration?
I'm saying that the use of the facility is approved by the administration because the board does not approve whether or not an outside organization may use a facility if they meet the administration determines whether the applicant meets the criteria set forth in the policy. If we are in a situation in which user of our facilities requests a waiver of the fee, either for the use of the building, auditorium or other rooms, or the fields, that is subject to board approval. And that's what's in front of us today. That being said, we have this resolution moved and seconded, and so any discussion on the resolution? Hannah.
I'm just gonna renew my concerns, separate this is not with respect to CYO, but I'm gonna renew my concerns regarding this process. I'm gonna renew my request that the policy committee review the policy governing board approval of this. I'm going to ask you to specifically look at the process by which whether or not this is like an administrative decision and this is a two-step process where the administration has already approved it and then we are getting it, or whether this is a single board decision, in which place I would say that we need to be part of the application process to be able to gain all of the information to make sure that whoever is applying, we would then have information as to whether or not they're in line with district policies. My understanding is that the policy committee is not working on this. I had asked that it be put somewhere other than the parking lot. And I will just again renew all of those concerns regarding this. Not this particular fee waiver, but just the board fee waiver approval process and the policy governing that. And I would love that we coordinate with the administration to make sure that we are doing the best thing in use of our public funds.
If I can respond, and normally I would
But you
not.
don't respond normally, so I don't think you should right now.
No, but
Right.
what I understand the concern that you raised.
It's a
And-
consistent concern. It's
and
a
it is-
concern
it
governing this.
It is a consistent concern, and in discussion with the president and in discussion with superintendent, I believe that a more comprehensive review of that policy in its entirety, which was adopted in 2002, is necessary. And let me suggest an alternative to the policy committee's consideration, which is a method, if you will, that we used once several years ago to deal with an issue where there was a lot of concern about how all those moving parts work, which is, and we did this back in 2014 when questions were raised by the board about the field trip policy in various segments and how it worked and what staff and faculty and administrators did in terms of timing and a lot of other things. And we established an ad hoc committee of board members and administrators to do a kind of a deep consideration of the policy and all its implications as you are asking about, Hannah. And I believe, if the board is in agreement, that that is a process that we should, as a board, undertake with regard to this. As I said, it was more than 20 years ago that we adopted this policy, and there's a lot of changes, legal changes, practical changes, operational changes that really warrant a fresh look. And I would suggest, and I'll ask kind of a general sense as to whether my colleagues are in agreement that we should use that vehicle to try to get answers to the concerns, and then that ad hoc committee provide recommendations to the policy committee and the board as to how our current public use of our facilities policy might be changed. And it would address, all the things that have been raised here to this point and other things that we haven't even focused on. So, and that's my suggestion. Let me just hear some comments, Theo.
Thanks. I agree with Anna that I guess I'll preface this by saying that, I do believe personally that our schools should be accessible, right, for programming that is beneficial to the community. Aside from the academic activities and formal kind of district activities, I think our school buildings should be accessible to nurture our students, nurture families, and be a space of collaboration with the community. And so I just want to preface by saying that I believe that, that should be the case. I share the concerns just about having clarity and making sure that we're all clear as to what the practices and policies currently are, and whether they need to be either looked at again and confirmed or adjusted in some way to fit the realities that whatever changes might have happened since, I guess you're saying 2002, when they were last looked at and potentially, I don't know if they were revised then or created then, but
Probably created then and never been revised.
okay. So it sounds like it's time to look at that again. I'd support the proposal to have, I'm not sure exactly about the structure, but I think a pretty active and robust participation from the board and the administration would be helpful to I think, sort of like anything, but just to land on a good process and outcome here. So I would support the proposal, support the calls for just more clarity around practice and policy here.
I too like the idea of doing this as a committee apart from the policy committee, simply because partially because the policy committee already has a lot on its plate to handle, and this is something that requires a pretty deep dive. And I think, and it's probably going to touch multiple policies. I think just as we have clarity, the current set of policies dictate and set out rules for what kind of organizations are allowed to use our facilities, apart from fee waivers, but put the fee waiver question in the hands of the board. I think we need at least a first round of some thought as to how we simplify that process and codify the process by which we decide which organizations get fee waivers and which do not. Rather than just leaving it for the board to figure out each time we're presented with this. And I call to my colleagues' attention the fact that generally we do these at the time of the reorg meeting, which is probably the most packed agenda of any meeting that we ever do. And which means that it gets potentially gets short shrift. And we tend to feel rushed, and it's in the middle, it's, you know, in summer, it's an inconvenient time to be figuring that kind of stuff out, and it's important. So, I concur that we should refer it to a committee. I'm not sure the mechanism, I think we would need to have a vote to create such a committee, a vote of the board.
That is a good question. But
And we don't need to do it today, but I think we need to probably, if we're gonna do that, we should probably try to get it onto the agenda for our next business meeting.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to interrupt because I want to make sure that this is actually, while I know that the policy surrounding this would be a board function, I don't know that reviewing the administrative team's process by which they receive an application for this fee waiver would be a board function.
We can set.
So
we
I
could-
would want some guidance from legal counsel regarding like what our parameters are in reviewing any of this.
I think we can set the policy in any way that is
The
compliant
policy,
with the
yes.
law and legal rulings, right?
The policy, yes, which is why I had always suggested that it be reviewed by the policy committee, because I've been reminded a number of times that this is actually a policy issue. So the ad hoc committee that then deep dives into like potentially administrative roles is something that I would want to make sure that we were not overstepping on as a board.
Well, I mean, the policy committee can certainly devolve some of its usual responsibilities around
So-
writing policy to the committee.
Right, but just to be clear, right, so like, from a practical standpoint, the district creates the form by which we receive the fee waivers, right? Are we allowed as a board to dictate policy that then changes their form? Like, I would want some guidance on that.
well, so first, if we were to say that the factors to be considered are A, B, C, D, and E.
But aren't those factors that should already be considered? Like, this is some of the
Well,
other
no.
issue that I have. that,
Well,
like,
no,
if you're saying the way that you're saying, the way that you proposed this was that the administrative team the administration, the district had already approved this. We were merely looking at the fee waiver issue, right? So that's assuming that they have already somehow evaluated whether or not this organization is in violation of any of our policies. Correct?
yeah,
Right, because that's the procedure that we set in policy.
We didn't set that.
No,
We
but
don't,
we have existing policies.
we have
For
existing
building
policy.
use.
For
There's,
building use, not for fee waiver. and
Right.
There's a difference.
right.
and I don't think that there's any statement as to what the administration feels about
Right,
the waiver.
there's any what?
I don't see anything that, I don't sense that administration has told us, give a waiver here.
No, I
give a
don't,
waiver
I'm not
here."
saying that at all. I'm saying for purposes of our policy, do we have all of the information that we need to consider whether or not we should grant a waiver?
Well, if I may, what I think this committee would be looking at is what information do our applicants ask for consistent with our policy, or first actually look at policy 1500 and 1500R and say, do we agree with the permitted uses that are there? Do we agree with the information that's in there, the prohibited uses? The authorizations, the information that we ask for, such as insurance certificates or whatever else we ask for? Is that what we should be asking? That's our policy and our
That's the
regulation.
policy, yes.
And if those are not necessary, or if there are other things that are necessary, then we would, the committee in consultation, working with administration, would determine what's needed,
So-
what's not
so-
needed, and then
But the crux of it is, are we still allowing people to apply for this that are violating our prohibited uses? Right? That's the crux of it. And what is the vehicle by which that is checked?
that would be part of the discussion, which might be incorporated into a directive by policy on what administration should do in those regards, or might not. You know, And that's all part of the work of the committee, of this ad hoc committee, I suggest, that would be able to then say, change 1500 to 1500R, their recommendation, to be able to address those questions and answer those questions, and then be able to work with them. Josh?
I think the complication here is we have a policy on the books, 1500, policy and a regulation on the books right now, which unfortunately have not been updated in quite some time. And as a result of the fact that they haven't been updated in quite some time, they have some clauses in them that we now know are not enforceable because of legal rulings that have occurred since the time that those policies were enacted by this body. So that needs to be addressed clearly, and that's certainly one of the topics that this would have to take on. And figure out, well, once we need to resolve that and also resolve the question of, well, what other strictures should we put? What other rules should we put on building use? And then add to that, what rules do we want to put on? You're allowed to build fee waivers or fee reduction. We may also want to include maybe fee reductions for certain cases.
Possible.
Right? When can we negotiate a fee reduction?
But it sounds like what we're saying is this committee would look at 1500R and a currently non-existent policy for fee waivers or fee reductions. And
Yeah.
we would come up with proposals to revamp language, add a section, etc. Based on what we believe is the legal and correct use of our facilities.
Right.
And for waivers.
And then that would go to the policy committee for language wordsmithing and discussion, and it would go to the board. And the board in the end would approve or disapprove, which is the process we used with the field trip
That's exactly.
policy in 2014, which resulted in a revision of that policy in 2016. So that is kind of a side discussion of the resolution that is before us, but I thought it important to say that's my feeling is, and I think with agreement of certainly the board president, and we've discussed this with the superintendent, that's the best way to kind of get everything together so we know we're doing it the way that's the right way to do it, the legally right way to do it, in a way that is best for our community and best for our staff who have to administer it. So under policy 2550, the board may from time to time establish committees by formal resolution whose membership will consist of members of the board, which is what we would be talking about here. The resolution will state the purpose of the committee and the deadline for its report. President shall appoint the members who shall be comprised of less than a full membership unless the majority of the board votes they be elected. The board committee shall undertake studies and make reports as charged by the board, not act on the board, and the board may establish standing or ad hoc committees and reserves the right to terminate committees. And then finally, the final decision is that of the board. So thinking of timing and thinking of the fact that we'd like to get this all done by the end of this school year so that we're facing, next year's applications and next year's applications for fee waivers, we have a revised policy in place.
I'd like to make a motion.
Can't make a motion, well, because we have a motion on the table.
I move to table this motion momentarily, and then I want to make another motion.
Rather than doing that, why don't we finish this work, and then we can, with the board's approval, depart from
The agenda.
the agenda
Okay.
and put in.
Okay, if
item
that's the better way to do it under Robert's rules, let's do that.
Okay, and then if you want to make the motion
Okay.
now, then, or, you know, today.
Let's go ahead and make the
we'll do
motion.
it. So, is there any other discussion on specifically on the motion that is before the board at present, which is resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves 2023-24 building use fee waiver for the Catholic Youth Organization? Any discussion on that specific motion before the board? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
One, two, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all those opposed? All those abstaining? 2, and the 2 abstentions are,
I think there were 3.
wait, 3 abstentions? Let me get it straight.
again.
What's that?
Do it again.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay, so we have 3 and 3 abstentions, which means that the motion is not passed. And the 3 were. I don't know. You know. Right. Okay, so one of 2 possibilities. One, since we are down 1 person, that may be placed on a future agenda or it may not. Because I would have preferred to have 7 people here to discuss and vote on, but we are where we are. So I will first entertain a motion to adjust the agenda to enable another item to be added as 3.3.
I move to insert item 3.3 into the agenda, the creation to establish and have an ad hoc committee of the board to examine the policies and procedures concerning the use of school facilities by outside groups, and the conditions by which such groups may receive fee waivers for the use of facilities or fee waivers or fee reductions for the use of facilities.
So the motion is to at 3.3 is to modify the agenda for that purpose.
Right,
Okay, then we'll go further. I
now
wanna
I'll
make-
move the same thing.
Right, and so we have a motion by Josh to modify the agenda. Do we have a second to Josh's motion? On a second, on a second. Okay, any discussion on that modification? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye,
Aye.
okay. All those opposed? 5-1 opposed, which is Omar. Any abstentions? Okay. So the agenda is now modified to add this item. Now, since that was kind of not just, we don't need the exact wording for the modification, but we
Right.
will need the exact wording for the.
I hope somebody wrote it down. And so, the resolve that the Board of Education hereby establish an ad hoc committee to examine and potentially revise.
Well, but before you go further, the committee does not examine. Remember, I read the committee reports to the board. makes recommendations for
Okay.
revision.
Well,
You had said examine the use of school facilities by outside
Yeah.
groups.
examine the use of outside, school facilities by outside groups. And the conditions under which they may receive fee waivers or fee reductions for said use.
And the conditions by which I'm gonna, before you actually make the motion, I'm gonna read it over again, receive fee waivers. Okay, this is what I have to this point.
Right, okay.
Okay, and then we're gonna go further from there, based on policy
Yeah.
2.50. Resolve the Board of Education establishes an ad hoc committee
Mhm.
to examine the use of school facilities by outside groups and the conditions by which they receive fee waivers, or they can receive fee waivers or fee reductions.
Mhm.
Okay, now, the next item,
And to report to the board of trustees their recommendations.
I would say, report their recommendations, or each recommendations, it's.
Fine.
Okay. To the board. Now, one thing that is called for in policy 2500, 2250, is establishing the number of members of this ad hoc committee from the board. And it could be 3, it could be 2, it could be
If it just can't be 4,
or more, because then, right,
because that would constitute a quorum of the full board. I think it should be 3. I mean, do we think it needs 3?
I think it's really a question,
Or one of my colleagues think about that.
it's really a question of how many who's interested.
I'm a little
If
concerned.
only 2 are interested, then don't make it 3.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a little concerned about the concern I have about making it 3 actually is that the more people you add to a committee, the harder it is to find the time for that committee to meet. And I think it's important to have board representation, obviously.
I'll note that the reg also asks us to come up for a deadline date for the report of the committee.
Yeah, we're gonna get to
We'll
that
get
next. But so what?
But just to your point on,
what-
we gotta follow that date.
I mean, I would suggest 3, just because, few people can't get together, then it's a committee of 1.
That's a good point. If we make it 3, yes, there may be a couple of meetings where not all 3 members can attend, but let's say 3.
Okay. And given what we've discussed, and given the fact that it is now November 2nd, what would the board, or Josh, since you're making the motion, and what kind
I'd
of
say by the end, maybe by the end. We wanna shoot for a resolution of this by the February business meeting?
well, remember, this is gonna be a report to the board,
And that's not policy to come
and the
out.
policy will come after it. So the question is, do you think that by
Then we
early
need,
February, 3 months, 3 people who will be appointed by the president, can get the work done?
that's why I came up with by the February, report to the board by the February meeting. That gives us enough time, hopefully, to get through. But it needs to be, if we're gonna put policy in place, it needs to be put in place in time, but well before the reorg.
Because then you need a first reading and a second.
Because we'll need
you'd also need the input of the policy committee. So is the policy committee committed to streamlining this?
I think the
You mean,
policy
yeah.
committee could commit to streamlining. this.
Yeah. Yeah, that would,
They
that
couldn't
would,
mean, that's one of the-
reviewing it, so I
Well,
just think it's, I mean,
I think that one of the reasons to spin this off into a separate committee like this is specifically so that they can focus exactly on that. And hopefully come up with a set of bullet points of what is desired to be in the policy changes. And that means that the only thing the policy committee needs to do relative to it is some wordsmithing and vetting it with legal counsel and
and determining, you know, because policy committee meets with, central office administration. So if the committees comes up with a recommendation that we are told is unworkable, then hopefully that will be all worked out in the work of the committee, but.
presumably. Oh, well. Ad hoc committees usually also often, not always, but often invite members of the administration to
Absolutely,
participate.
and I
in-
presume it.
Yes, which
would.
I would expect for this.
So, does the board, and I know we're still kind of working this through before we actually have a resolution, do my colleagues think that 3 months is enough time to get a handle on this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think 3 months is enough time. If we did it by February, then if we essentially get it to the policy committee, get it to the board by February, then March, potentially hopefully policy committee can streamline and get it in for a March a March business, a first reading at the March business meeting. And a second reading at the April business meeting.
so
If we-
the regular meeting in February is February 1st. The February 15th meeting is a budget work session, and then the next meeting is the March 7th regular meeting. On the new proposed, which
And in the middle of that, you've got,
a week.
in the middle of that, you've got a week, of February break.
Well,
Do we think that, well, I'll raise my hand, I'll be on the committee, since I'm.
Well, you have to be appointed by the president.
Yeah,
That's
right,
part of the
right, right.
rule.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's-
I'm raising my hand to say I am interested in being on the
Okay.
committee.
so let me make a suggestion. Why don't we make it,
January,
make it the March business meeting for the report? And the reason I say that is, by and large, anybody who is making a request for a use of facilities for a season will have already made that request, even, you know, for example, Croton Lacrosse. They will have made their request by that time, and I would assume that our policy would want to say, this policy shall take effect for applications submitted after date X. So thinking about the fact that probably, and I don't know, they go to the district clerk and then probably are reviewed by facilities, they probably will, we probably get most of those in
Summertime.
the summertime. So long as we have that in place
we
early.
get it mostly in the summertime, how do we have them on the agenda for the reorg meeting?
Well, that's part, that is actually,
A little bit of the problem. So what we do is we carry over usually the previous year.
Oh, so what's presented to us is just based on what they requested the prior year?
I don't mean to
yeah, so I'm just,
speak, but like, I asked that this year at the reorg meeting, and I specifically asked where the CYO waiver was, and I was told that they hadn't applied for it, so I don't think everything is carried over. This
And-
year, CYO wasn't carried over. I asked Denise.
and so that's really part of the process that I think the committee, I would
You wanna
suggest,
clarify.
looks at, does people apply every year? Do people, and you know, does an organization apply every year? Do we not just carry them over because they had it last year? Whatever that is, that's what you'll be determining, because
And there's nothing that says that
Tracy, I'm sorry, not Denise, I asked Tracy.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
okay.
misspoke. I asked Tracy because she was still here.
Okay,
I asked Tracy.
so she said they were all
Just kinda-
reapplications.
No,
No,
no.
she said, well, she didn't indicate that they were carried over. I specifically asked about CYO and why it wasn't in, and she said that they had not yet applied at that time
Oh.
in the meeting.
So I don't think that February
But it
first,
might be the one-off because they're in the middle of the season, you know, it might be that most of the summer ones are carried over, but they don't know if they need the facilities based on how many teams they're gonna have play, because they don't know until they have
And that's exactly.
their registration up.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's a one-off.
Yeah.
so I suggest that because particularly this is the February,
I was actually thinking the other way around. I want to give the policy committee a little more time. I think that the ad hoc committee could meet and come up with recommendations in time for the February,
fine,
in time for the February.
The regular meeting in February.
February 1.
First.
Yeah, so by
three
February
months from
1.
yesterday.
3 months, we should be able to get something done in 3 months.
I mean, assuming whoever the president appoints.
Okay, well, so what, we'll say it for February first, and if the report is, well, we're not done, we'll have to, you know,
We can always move to
can always
extend it.
move to extend it. So the committee shall report its recommendations to the board at the February business meeting. And I'm not saying February first because if we get canceled because of a snowstorm.
In case it gets changed, okay, by the February business meeting, fine with me.
So the resolution that I have which has not yet been moved, let me read it and then move.
Do you have to move that?
Well, no, it's separate. I just want to ask about process about, maybe I'll just ask it. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on the process for the final product here. So the committee is appointed is the next step.
Mhm.
And then that committee meets, they present a recommendation by the February meeting to the full board.
Yep.
At that point, the recommendation goes to the policy meeting,
Well,
to the policy committee,
Mhm.
to then, in essence, review it, adjust it if necessary, based on whatever the committee thinks. And then there's first reading
And
to the full board, second reading to the full board, and then a vote by the full board to adopt what then is the policy committee's
draft,
product
right,
with, that came from a recommendation of the committee.
right. The one thing I would add there is that I would presume when this ad hoc committee makes its report in February, then the board would have an opportunity then in public session to discuss and say, I don't like that. And that would then give direction to its policy committee how to draft this. You know, it's not just that the report is kind of.
Of course.
Yeah, but with that discussion, I think that's how the process.
And it's also possible, ad hoc committees usually also, when they meet, they report to the board at the board reports as well. So that's that would not be the ad hoc committee's only opportunity to convey information to the board as a whole. We can always have an interim report, so this is what progress we made so far, this is what we're thinking. Can even share a draft, draft recommendations at that time if we want. It's really up to the committee to decide how to do that. And that's exactly what happened with the past ad hoc committees that
Right.
I've been on.
Right, the field trip.
The field trips one did that, made, I think, 2 interim reports before giving their final report. But that committee ran quite a lot longer.
Yes, that was like a year.
Yeah. I'm done.
Okay, so my question with regards to the resolution language is, what Josh has proposed so far, I think was what seems to be in the draft, since I can see it sitting next to me, is we're talking about examining the use by outside organizations. Does that also mean, though, that we're examining that this ad hoc committee would be examining the policies or just the historical actual use data?
I would suggest policies.
So then that.
Yeah, that ought to be in there.
That ought to be in the resolution.
Yeah, you're
Specifically,
right. Thank
policy
you.
1500 public use of
So-
school facilities and 1500 R regulation, public use of school facilities regulation. So that ad hoc committee is looking at both of those. And in essence, serving as a sort of, you know, side policy committee,
Mhm.
looking at the policy,
Yeah.
but also looking at the actual numbers and data so that we have a sense of, and should be able to present to the full board a sense of what organizations are using the facilities, if any organizations have been denied use of the facilities, which ones have gotten fee waivers, which ones haven't. For me, it'd be helpful to know what the fee is we're even talking about, like what is the actual number, like what is the meaning in concrete terms of revenue for the district as well. So looking at that entire picture, I think, in
Yeah.
order to be able to, my hope is not have to have this conversation annually about each one.
Yeah, I just call out that the wording of the resolution to create the committee does not limit what the committee can.
Can cover.
It's not limiting, I don't believe. Unless we were to put in specific language in the resolution, creating the committee saying you can only look at these things, then it's not actually limited. There's flexibility there, but it's really, this is a charge to the committee, and I think it's good to add in, look at both the historical use and the policies that govern
Right.
approval.
Okay, so let me tell you what I have, and then I will entertain a motion, and unless we want to wordsmith some more. Resolve that the Board of Education establishes an ad hoc committee to examine policy 1500 public use of school facilities and policy 1500R, public use of school facilities regulation, comma, use of school facilities by outside groups, comma, comma, and the
Thank you.
conditions by which they may receive fee waivers or fee reductions. The committee, split the sentence, the committee shall report its recommendations to the Board of Trustees. This committee shall consist of 3 members. The committee shall report its recommendation to the board at the February business meeting.
Seems okay to me.
So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
I think we had extensive discussion on this subject.
Just,
Yes,
I'm struggling with this a little bit because I'm all for updating policy. Examining practices, making sure they're up to date. And I know we all vote our conscience, we have to vote our conscience, right? We all view the land through our own experiences and our own, or view the world through our own lens and our own experiences, but at the same time, I just want to remind the board that our responsibility is to act in the best interest of students and the district. And I'm just struggling to understand. To me, it feels like we're holding the students at CYO hostage because we want to review a policy and a practice. And while I totally understand the need to do that, and I appreciate it, again, I'm just struggling with, is this in the best interest of our students, the way we're just acting on today?
So I want to, acknowledge how you feel about this. I will just, remind you that this does not disallow CYO from using the gym. This is merely with respect to the fee waiver, which I asked about last time, and I understand it's a nominal fee that is in the past been charged to even like some of the PTAs for their use of the facilities. So this is not a judgment with respect to CYO, and I said that at the beginning of this. And I raised concerns about the board being in a position where we're than voting, and it looks like we're voting on a particular organization's use. It's more the information that we're given as a board and the way that the policy is crafted. And it's not our role to deny access. That's an administrative role. This is merely the fee waiver.
That's right, and I think my understanding is the board's involvement with the fee waiver because it's a financial implication, and that's why it is brought up to the board level.
My assumption is actually specifically because I don't know what this costs the district. And I don't know what, neither do I know what this cost, I can't vote on it because I don't know what the financial impact to the district is. Neither do I know what the financial impact in relative terms is to CYO. And in order for me to vote one way or another, I would need to know both of those things. And right now, I don't know either.
I guess my other question is, what prevents us from being on the next board agenda when there are when there are 7 members sitting here? So basically, you're looking at another month before this fee waiver.
Actually,
Next meeting.
yeah,
It could be at the work session.
we can include it in 2 weeks, yeah. So that is
And
not,
we could, and
that is not the motion that is before us now, because we've
No, but
already
it's part of
voted
the
3
it is
zero
part of the
three.
discussion.
No, but it's part of the discussion.
Right, and that's fine.
And we could even potentially declare that waiver to be retroactive to a particular date,
Potentially.
if we chose to do so.
But I think the point being that to answer Anna's question, certainly, we can put this on the agenda. And to the extent there are questions, such as the question that Josh raised about, how much are we talking about, or Anna, I think, or Hanamika, somebody raised about how much, this really is, how much they're paying, or that we would be foregoing. If we get those questions to the board officers to provide to administration, we'll have that information in advance of the next meeting. And if it's the desire of the 6 of us, and that seems to be, that we place this on an agenda on November 16th. Well, I'm sure we're gonna have some business before we get on to the work session. We can do that and come to a conclusion.
That makes good sense, and I think what you're talking about here, the resolution that we're actually considering, which is the formation of this ad hoc committee. This ad hoc committee can also take this into account and ensure that when we make a recommendation after they do their research, that when we have to look at these questions again, all of these proposals include that information up front, just like co-curricular assignments, just like other things that we look at, so that if it is in fact this is our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we are, managing that piece of it correctly, we'll have the information in front of us.
And I'll just preemptively recommend that there be a deadline by which you have to apply for these fee waivers so that all of them are considered in unison. And we're not singling out organizations or having to review single organizations. They could all be approved at the reorg meeting.
I think
I'm
that,
not sure I agree with that.
that's something for the committee to discuss. I would also,
It could be pulled out of a consent agenda at that point as well. I think
Let's
for
discuss that in the
example,
committee, I
the
think.
committee will discuss,
well,
but I know
it's my
there,
recommendation.
there is
You could overrule me.
there is a fee waiver we proposed, or we adopted, approved last month for someone who's got a particular use of the facility on December 2nd, use of the auditorium for some.
This is the third outlier fee waiver that we have considered.
Right, but I'm
And
saying
I've I've renewed my concerns regarding this process at each one of them.
Understood, but I'm just saying that those folks may not have even known in July that they were gonna have an event in December. But whatever, that's for the committee to
That's
talk
what rules
about
are
and.
right?
Well, if it
Everybody
eliminates some
accordingly.
flexibility, it's
Yeah.
like a community organization putting on a jazz concert, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Based off of the dates, only because I know about the concert from, having received an invitation to it. So things like that, it's like we don't want to prevent community organizations from approaching the school district for use of communal spaces that their tax dollars fund to be able to do events just by setting an arbitrary deadline. I think your point though, Anna, is about that's maybe like seasonal use perhaps, like if we're talking about like use for like a full season for a sports team, or is it, or are you talking about specifically like even one-off uses for a particular event, like a performance or a reading or something like
I
that?
think there has to be some consideration given to the fact that as a district, we take a lot of time and there's a lot of planning and a lot of moving parts regarding our facilities. And I don't know if it's an undue burden on the administrative team to have to consider every independent fee waiver and then evaluate the use of every single room in the building to see if they can accommodate that. I think that we should be giving our administrative team or whoever's in charge of that, the courtesy of considering that at one time to allow for planning accordingly. I don't think that there are a lot of public spaces to use in this community. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect people to maybe have 2 deadlines a year, but it shouldn't be an open door policy to everybody to like just bombard us with applications for fee waivers.
I think these are all good things for the committee to consider. I also think it's very helpful to the committee and the board to have heard some of these concerns, make note of them, to think about them, and incorporate them as appropriate in reports and recommendations back to the board. So I think that's really great. That having been said, is any other discussion about whether or not this committee should be established? Hearing none. All those in favor of establishing this committee? Aye.
Aye.
6-0. As far as I know, there's no opposing, no abstentions. Motion carries. And I thank everybody for what was a very helpful, discussion. Robust discussion.
Civil, robust discussion.
Absolutely. Going to part 4 of the agenda, ongoing business, and 4.1. Resolution that the Board of Education recommended action, the Board of Education approved the amended 2023-2024 Board of Education meeting, singular, not plural, meeting calendar as presented.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the,
I apologize to the board. Could somebody please tell me what changed?
Our board calendar did not meet the statutory timeline for the voting process.
Okay.
So in other words,
I think it was May 9th.
Thursday, May 9th was May 2nd.
well, Thursday, May 2nd was when we had our
Was
meeting.
when we
May
had our
9th
original meeting.
is, May 2nd is too early.
Correct, so
prior
it
to
needs to be 7 to 14 days prior to
Okay.
the vote. We need to hold the public budget hearing.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
So, any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, donations. We have one donation on the agenda, item 5.1, that the board gratefully accepts the donation of $600 from the classes of 1972 and 1973 as a contribution to the Croton Harmon High School General Fund. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Seeing no discussion desired. Call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries, and we are very grateful and thank the classes of 1972 and 1973 for their continuing support of our schools as hallowed and longstanding alumni group. So, consent agenda. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. On the consent agenda, I'll give everybody a moment to see if there's anything on the consent agenda that people have questions about.
Not a question, but a statement. I wanted to give my, actually, hang on, where's that? Yeah, let's see. I think the one I'm actually was going to talk about is the overnight trip by the Quebec Club. First of all, my thanks to the former ad hoc committee on that addressed field trips for setting a thorough process in this regard, and my thanks to those who are organizing the Quebec trip for their thorough application. We have seen plenty of applications under the trips policy that were not this thorough, and this one was very thorough, and I appreciate it.
Would you expect that of Sally Farms?
Not at all.
Kudos to Sparks.
Anybody else?
Well, I'm assuming everyone's noticed that there's a facilities use fee waiver as part of the consent agenda, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that is item 6.3. Having been brought to our attention, anything else that anyone wishes to mention or discuss or ask questions about? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries 6-0. Okay, we're now at the closing of the meeting. It is time for the opportunity, second hearing of the public. If there is any member of the public that desires to address the board, now is the time to do so. Once again, state your name, indicate on the list if you are just the president, and we'll have 3 minutes.
I think it's incumbent upon the board to make its facilities open to the public as often as possible. You're an expensive operation. You're probably the second largest employer in town, perhaps the first. The public facilities, and you should open them up as often as you can. If it costs money to the user, you should charge them for the money. Just don't screw up like the village does. I want to get back to what I was talking about before. In terms of resources used in discriminatory policy, setting equity policy, etc. I've mentioned Black Lives Matter several times as a corporation. I was funded by a imprisoned terrorist, Susan Rosenberg, and monitored to steal or squander $95 million. The author you use is Ibrahim Kendi. Came under accusations of financial mismanagement, dysfunctional leadership, and failure to honor his obligations with millions of dollars of grant money. Famous racial author. Then there's Eric Stewart. Eric Stewart cited his work is cited for proof of systematic racism in police departments, etc. Is fired by the university as a full professor of criminology for falsifying his research. Then I just talked about the Southern Poverty Law Conference. And by the way, their union condemned Israel immediately after 1,400 people were massacred and before Israel commenced any military operations against Gaza, condemned Israel. That's their union, the Southern Poverty Law Conference Union. And of course, this district is very, very familiar with David Kirkland, who is out of NYU Steinhardt, one of his consultants, Natalie Zberger. He is a Marxist, and he was the father of CRT, and he created the equity agenda for the entire state of New York and is referenced in that agenda. There's enough real genocide out there as opposed to following these bogus trails which you have followed for years. There's enough real stuff out there. There is no genocide against transgenders. There is genocide against certain ethnic groups in the world. And you shouldn't confuse the two. To back up this, problem with these DEI groups, one, the Village of Croton just adopted a statement of inclusiveness, which is a joke. It looks like it was done by a ninth grader. When you look at it, you can say, wow, there's 5 groups they left out. And this item in the news is from locally, where the town of Newcastle dissolved the entire committee on race, equity, and inclusion
Mr. Riley?
after sharp disagreements over its failure to denounce anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Is there, seeing nobody else in the audience, nobody else desiring to speak with us, we will move on to item 7.2, board reports. In order, advocacy.
Yes, we do have a report. So although the advocacy committee did not meet since our last discussion, we did participate in the NISBA annual business meeting on October 16th, I think it was. It was a record-breaking 8-hour long session, during which delegates considered 56 resolutions that were proposed by school boards across the state. Of those 56 resolutions, 32 were recommended by the resolutions committee for adoption, 24 were not recommended. However, it was interesting to note, and as I did because I was our board's representative for the voting for the business meeting, 35 resolutions were adopted. A number of them actually were not sort of put forth as recommended by NISBA, but did go through. And I think just, you know, for the interest of this board, because we did review and discuss all of the resolutions at a earlier this season, just a couple of notes for the group so that they're aware of sort of what happened. We had discussed the question of whether school districts and BOCES should be authorized to offer childcare if they so chose. We had a robust discussion about that here, and that resolution did carry. The other one that we didn't discuss, but it's just interesting to note, is that statewide, although here in Westchester, West Putt, our sort of regional arm, and NISBA recommended legislation to eliminate regents testing in favor of other forms of assessment, that did not actually carry. There are a number of other resolutions that were not recommended as well, to go forth by NISBA that did carry, and the advocacy committee will share those results directly because we don't want to take a lot of time going into them here. But it is interesting to note that they do cover things specifically like electric vehicles. There's statewide concern about the requirements that are coming into force shortly. And also questions about local zoning and things like that. So we'll share that with the full board so they can review it at their leisure. Another thing that's coming up in terms of advocacy opportunities is that the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee in the village are looking into ways to continue to make our streets safer. There may be an opportunity which will be presented first to the advocacy committee and then to the full board to sign on a letter of support to one of the initiatives that the Bike Ped Committee and the board are working on to bring some infrastructure improvements to the community. And I think there are things that we might be aligned with in terms of safe paths to school and safe bike paths for our students getting back and forth to school. So that's the advocacy update.
Thank you. Board development. I would assume that Sarah normally reports on board development as the chair of that committee, but she's not here. Omar, I know, is the other member of the committee. Omar, you got anything?
No, we haven't met since our last.
I will say, however, that in my discussions with Sarah, she knows that work has to be done on planning the board retreat. I think we can say to the board, rest assured that that has not been forgotten.
Yes.
Communications.
Communications is not met. I will work with Denise to set up a doodle to have that happen shortly.
Okay, audit, I assume there's nothing to work with.
No.
Okay, in policy, as I said previously, policy committee met in October to consider the policies that we had for first reading, and we'll be meeting again on November 15th. Where we will intend to discuss, continue our discussion of social media policy or policies, and talk about some other policies that have been recommended by NISBA or that the administration has indicated might be ripe for review and revision. Okay, so we don't have any other policies for board reports, so now we'll move to polling of the board. Polling of the board, Josh, you're up first.
I attended the CET Building Planning Council meeting today. There was an extensive discussion of initiatives at CET related to our what school can be vision. I was looking for the right word to use there. And there were it was a really great roundtable of ideas and thinking outside the box, and it was very creative, and I was really excited to see the amount of creativity that was being presented there, not just by the administration, but also by the teachers and the parents, everybody around the table. And it really makes me hopeful about the way we can evolve instruction and utilize our instructional expertise in ways that are efficient and basically where we can get the most out of the resources that are available to us and bring them to the most students possible in the most effective way. There are some very interesting ideas.
Anyone else?
I have one other item for polling, which is, as you know, on Sunday, we turn the clocks back an hour. And as I often do, when it comes time to change the clocks, I mention at polling of the board that I remain unconvinced that the way that school is scheduled time-wise, start and end times, are actually aligned to the way teenage bodies work. And I believe we may already have an item about start and end times on the parking lot, and I'd like to reiterate my interest in that, in revisiting that topic at some point in the coming month.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have a couple of things. So as I mentioned earlier, I did attend the last bicycle pedestrian committee village meeting, and as I mentioned in my advocacy portion of the conversation, there's still continuous work taking place to identify places within the village where we can use just a better eye to sort of safety and infrastructure. So that's all ongoing. We'll definitely keep you posted on that. The other, update, relates to, today I attended, Croton Harmon High School Building Planning Council, and we had an excellent discussion of the community service requirements for graduation. One of the highlights was to hear from our student members of, Building Planning Council, just how enthusiastically so many students at our high school approach the question of community service. They are, as most people may, well, as people may know, they are required to complete 25 hours of community service in order, the goal is to complete that to graduate from high school. And if they want to be eligible for the National Honor Society, they need to complete 40 hours by junior year. There are a number of great volunteering opportunities in the community. And the systems at the high school have made it so much easier for people to track their volunteer hours and approve other people's volunteer hours. So those are all, I think, great improvements. It was just a great discussion, sort of talking about what some folks might consider to be the gray areas of what is considered community service and what isn't. And I think high school administration will be sort of refining some of that to make sure that folks in their community are headed towards the best opportunities to be able to fulfill those hours while benefiting the community. So it was a great conversation.
Question concerning that.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that there might be a request coming out of the Building Planning Council to adjust policy related to that?
Well, so we did actually look at policy 4770 graduation requirements. And no, I don't think so. I think that the feeling is, you know, within that group that it's important to ensure that everyone is sort of, you know, in conforming with the policy. And there's an understanding that there's a great deal of flexibility at the building level to sort of, you know, put the processes and the qualifications into place. So I think people are feeling good about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anna.
I want to commend Chef on their amazing dine around evening. We were fortunate enough to participate in that and in the after party and the dance floor. And that was just a wonderful community event to attend. And we're so grateful to Chef for all that they do for our schools. I am very much as an avid fan looking forward to the high school theater production of Mamma Mia. Some of us have heard some of the students singing in the hallways. I will remind people to go to our district website and purchase tickets if they so choose. It's scheduled for Friday, November 17th, 18th, and 19th. I think Sarah would have covered that in her president's report, but she's not here. And I sit with Josh on as representatives to FSC. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the details of this winter formal. And I think that's it.
I'm sorry. I have.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more thing to say.
I have one more.
Anamika and Anamika, my fellow board member, was kind enough to reach out to Michael Flockin regarding the discussion at our last meeting, or the last meeting I attended, regarding us sitting in on the Culture of Respect Task Force, and Michael added us to those distribution lists. So we will be there on Monday, November 27th, despite the fact that it's my birthday. And we will report back to everyone after that. That's it.
I apologize for omitting Student Faculty Congress, which I attended on the most recent G Day, which I think was Tuesday. On G Day. This was, I believe, the first Student Faculty Congress meeting post retreat, which is when we usually start attending. They have elected officers, and there was a interesting discussion concerning areas of focus, ways to get more students involved in coming to Student Faculty Congress. There was a discussion of I believe Amelia already mentioned about the Student Faculty Congress members that would be attending our board meetings. It was a very good first meeting, and first business meeting of Student Faculty Congress, and I look forward to many more.
Okay, Theo.
my daughter Paz, who is a PVC student in fifth grade, she never really tells us anything about her day. She's one of the kids that I think many of us can relate to, us asking how their days went and them saying, nothing at all. And so, and she broke with that to report that the other day, John Griffiths attended her class. She was glowing about this, by the way, and sang a song on the band and played banjo. And she was particularly, I can't remember the name of the song or what, it was about an animal maybe, but
The cat came back.
the cat came back. So she was very excited that it was that song that she knew from camp. So I want to thank you for doing that. Because she was really glowing about it, and it was probably the only thing she's ever reported back to us.
It sounds like.
Anything that done.
Are you suggesting that perhaps John should have a standing gig in her class like once a week
Yeah.
or so?
And I think he should replace the superintendent's jokes.
Okay, Omar, do you have anything before? I go?
No.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, I attended the PVC Building Planning Council this afternoon. And our discussion was focused on how PVC has taken the recommendations of the Equity Stakeholder Task Force and I'll use the word, which is really not nice, operationalized it into areas, all facets of the school community, including positive social consciousness of students, hiring and retention policies and prior practices, curriculum, professional development, and community engagement, and in particular, we discussed the manner in which the staff, faculty, councils, administrators have been working with those students who are not predominant English speakers and their parents to provide them with connection and to the school and connection to their fellow students and their fellow parents, and the work that they expect to do in the future in that regard. Next month, we will start a discussion on transitions. Both the transition from CET to PVC and the transition from PVC to the high school. And we will look forward, I look forward to a robust discussion, like robust discussions about things that are done or could be done better with regard to those transitions. I also want to mention, as I said before, is that I attended, as did Sarah and Steve and Jared, the NISBA convention. What I have not done yet, I may do because I do this many years, is write up my notes of all the sessions that I attended. Attended the law seminar, and the topics that were discussed included the managing, how you manage student behavior in schools, things like disproportionality based on race or disability or whatever, and looking at those statistics and the legislation that is out there, employee religious accommodation rights, the recent decisions in by the Supreme Court about the accommodation that is required to provide to employees who need accommodation for their religious observance. Special education update, case law, and other items that relate to special education. There was a session on school board use of social media. And the two Supreme Court cases that were argued the day before yesterday on the subject of whether and to what extent the use of a personal social media platform, be it Facebook or otherwise, might be considered to be a communications vehicle of the district, because the school board member may be seen as speaking on the personal page as a district representative, depending on what's posted, etc. That is a very contentious and difficult to parse issue. I will note that I forwarded to Josh, who is dealing with the preparation and discussion, or leading a discussion in the policy committee of that policy. I forwarded to him the materials, that presentation, and that will be considered. There's also a session in the law seminar on collective bargaining. And lastly, a review of certain SED cases that have been decided recently that might affect school districts. I also attended several different presentations on the subject of electric vehicles and implementation. The first of the sessions I attended, actually attended two. The first session was a presentation by a district near Buffalo who talked about the challenges and that they faced in putting together and planning for EVs and how they worked with their utilities and their suppliers to try to deal with those issues. A lot of the comments that came from the public or the audience was how this is a initiative that is going to create grave problems for districts and is never going to be able to be implemented by 2027 for purchases in 2035 for all vehicles in the fleets of school districts or private contractors with whom school district contract. And there was a lot of very kind of almost vituperative complaints about this to people who really couldn't do anything about it because they weren't the state. And they were trying to do the best they could with the mandates that have been created. I attended another session the following morning where there were representatives of NYSERDA and the upstate utility National Grid, bus manufacturers, etc., who had a rather extensive and interesting discussion of the challenges and the resources that are available and that may be available to districts to try to meet these obligations. The one thing I will note is that the money from the environmental bond issue, $500 million, that is going to be around for grants to districts. Those grants will be, can be applied for starting at 10 a.m. on November 29th. And unlike the prior grants that we had talked about from NYSERDA and through the Volkswagen settlement, those grants do not have restrictions on them based on the nature of the school district or the nature of the community served or the age and of the fleets that would be retired when EVs are being purchased. So a lot of those restrictions that we talked about a year or two ago are not going to be for that pot of money. I know our assistant superintendent for business is well aware of the application opening and I'm sure we're going to be following through. I also attended one other session, which was I think very moving. It was a session put on by the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, a high school teacher, and a high school social worker from the Hampton Bays School District down on Long Island. That district is probably 2/3 immigrants from South and Central America, some of whom are what we now refer to as undocumented. The remaining 1/3 is predominantly, as they describe themselves, 8th generation baymen, oyster, people who farm oysters and go out and get lobster, and have lobster traps, etc. So it's a very divergent community. And what they did, they put in a very innovative program to help the students who came to the district deal with their adjustment to being in the United States, being in the district, and their trauma through art, through writing, through sharing with with other students in the school and the community. And while they did not identify any of the students, in fact, when they did their presentation, they had the students hold their paintings or drawings in front of their face because they did not want the students to be identified or cast aspersions upon them. They said that this was a very important program for those students. And I went in part because Rachel DePaul said this is one that I would like us to hear about. And it is one which that material I will be sharing with her so that she can consider how that might be used within our district. I know that other folk who went with us, and you saw the picture of the wings, well, us at the Anchor Bar, went to other presentations, and I don't know, Steve, if there's anything in particular that you saw that might be of interest to sharing your opinion.
I think in the interest of time, I've shared some in the weekly last week, and we'll share some more detail tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, I mentioned that, and I wanted to mention that publicly because I think it's important for us as a board and for our community to understand that we go to conventions like the NISBA convention in order to learn, and as Steve said in his superintendent's report, in order to interact with others and engage in discussions with others from throughout the state, which really helps us perform our role as school board members. Next year, NISBA convention will be in New York City, which will provide all of our board members a greater opportunity to be able to get there and see what's being offered. I have nothing else. And if there is nothing else, then we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is items for the next meeting. So I think,
I have an item for items needed for the next board meeting.
okay,
First of all, I call attention to Denise that the parking lot link seems to be broken. If we could fix that, I'd appreciate it. And I found a document which I believe is the parking lot that I had my own link to. I believe I mentioned earlier that I'd like to get school start and end times added to the parking lot if it isn't already there.
Could you forward that to me, please?
I feel like I had an older one.
Yeah, I don't know if this is. I just sent it.
Okay, so that is not necessarily for the next meeting, but we've certainly got that now on our radar. I know one of the things that may come up either at the November 16th or December business meeting is, as we talked about earlier, reconsideration of a resolution regarding the fee waiver request by CYO. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Denise, the December meeting is when you start your discussion. I'll be brief, albeit brief, about budget and budget consideration, so we will be looking forward to that. And if there is nothing else that is, people feel ought to be added, then, I guess, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Okay. On the motion, no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, none, motion carries, we are adjourned at, what is it, 9:23?